Testing, testing, testing. System check. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Sound check. I'm just testing the system to make sure that you all could hear me and you all could see my screen. If that is the case, please send me a message and I'll deeply appreciate it. And we're just about to start today's webinar. Again, thank you all for attending. Very, I would say, critical webinar in terms of how it pertains to the procurement function and transforming from the traditional methods and mechanisms to world-class procurement. Could you all see my screen and could you hear me clearly? Just send me a message. I'll deeply appreciate it. Okay, seems as though we're pretty much set and ready to go. Okay, so today is a webinar on transforming the procurement function from the traditional methods to world-class procurement. And it's part 1 of a part 4 series. So it's a lot of material to cover. And what I'm going to do today is the overview, the framework that we're going to use going forward. And the next 3 webinars after this, we'll go into the detail in each one of the sections. So the key points for all of the webinars, the key takeaways would be for us to understand the current state and to be able to visualize the future state procurement function, to be able to understand how to design a world-class procurement function and how to leverage the SCOR model, the supply chain operations reference model, change management, the balanced scorecard methodologies to realize world-class status, and how to move from what we call the traditional total cost of ownership to total cost to serve. So these would be the 4 major takeaways of all 4 parts of this series. So with that said, we'd like to get right into it in terms of the traditional procurement function. It's I would say it's very much focused on price, quality, delivery, payment terms, warranty, negotiations, and contracts, and the dynamics and the processes in that pertain to these particular areas, with a hyper focus on price. And one of the webinars that we did was looking beyond price for cost reduction opportunities, and we saw that there is a whole plethora of cost reduction opportunities outside of the price points that we get for our mission critical inputs. There's a whole, there were like 13 dimensions that we went over, 7 or 8 categories of waste, and then the 6 major losses in business. And it also extends way beyond those 13 or so parameters. So this is pretty much I would say the focal points of the traditional methods. And again, a lot of price focus, and I would say in many cases where we would beat up on suppliers for a better price, and the degree of collaboration and looking at the upstream processes and looking at the downstream processes for cost reduction opportunities I would say in many cases there's an oversight. Also, the key performance indicators or the key metrics that we use to determine the traditional procurement function. Once we look at the more modern approach and methods and requirements, as you go forward, we would see that many of those KPIs and metrics, performance metrics, would change. So this is an overview of what it would take to transform a procurement function, and we put this in 7 or so competency areas, and we see to the right of the screen the methodologies and the frameworks that could be leveraged to realize this degree of transformation. So competency area number 1 would be, and this depends on us as procurement professionals and leaders acquiring the capability and the abilities to again look at the supply chain and the procurement function in a very holistic way, and look at it in terms of how those processes, the supply chain and the procurement function processes, interact and impact the business landscape or the organizational landscapes that we are part of, and to what we call dismantle or demolish the silo thinking methodologies and processes that I would say a big part of the traditional method. So with that said, competency area number 1 would be the ability to assist, to improve, or to lead the corporate strategic planning processes. And what we're seeing in recent times is a dramatic increase in the amount of C-level procurement professionals, so the chief procurement officer level, the vice presidents of procurement. We've seen a dramatic rise in the need for people with those skill sets. And once a procurement professional is called upon to interact and to engage at that level, it requires the ability to, again, to assist, to improve, or even to lead the corporate strategic planning processes. And once we get into the detail in the next webinar, so we're going to go into some strategy frameworks. I'm going to focus on the framework from the Association of Strategic Planning and those processes. Competency area number 2, the ability to improve, to assist, to improve, or to lead product strategy planning processes, and DFSP, which I identified as design for strategic procurement. So we see in recent times a requirement where there's a required shift from the procurement function as being traditionally tactical and transactional oriented to more strategic. And we see in modern times where many organizations are leveraging their supply chain and their procurement functions to gain competitive advantage. And in order to do that, us as procurement professionals, we have to be able to operate on and understand the processes in our organization and the interaction of all of the processes in our value streams. Again, from the strategic level, the big picture, the tactical level, and the operational level. We have to understand how each one of the processes in our environment, we have to be able to understand the cause and effect of those engagements. Competency area number 3, the ability to design the procurement function strategy to realize the mandates of the corporate strategy. So we're talking here about really understanding the requirements and the mandates of our organizations at the strategic level, and to be able to design the procurement function strategies in alignment with the corporate strategies to realize the overall goals and objectives. So again, a shift from the more tactical, short range thinking, the transactional type of mindset to a more strategic mindset. Competency area number 4, the ability to execute the procurement function strategy. So many of us may have been or have encountered situations where strategies are formed. The C level or the senior management once a year, they go away to some retreat, and then they come back with the strategic plan and they attempt to deploy it. And many of us have witnessed what we call spots, strategic plans sitting on the top shelf, where a lot of those strategies are not executed and not executed effectively. So the ability to execute the procurement function strategy and to design the strategy and to execute the strategy is critical. And to execute the procurement function strategy, once we get into detail, we're going to be going over the SCOR model, supply chain operations reference model. And I urge you all to do some research. So prior to the next webinar, I think that's going to be, we'll cover that in webinar 3. But if you could do your research on the SCOR model and how it pertains to the procurement function, and how it enables us to view that procurement function in a very holistic way, and to really to understand the supply chain process interactions. I think it would be a very, very good exercise, and it'll be tremendous benefit. But if you could do research before attending that webinar, that will be awesome. And also the ability to transform the procurement function. So, and we speak here, we look at competency area number 5, we're talking about actually the actual transformation and the change management processes and the improvement of our procurement function operations. So in many cases, we speak about change and we speak about transformation, and we attempt to do this in silo mode. So we look at our departments, our functional areas. In particular for us, we look at our supply chain or the procurement function, and we attempt to improve those processes. And we do it a lot of times in silo mode. So we look at our processes and we attempt to fix or to improve. We attempt the dynamics of transformation without fully aligning those initiatives to the bigger picture, to the corporate situation. And sometimes, if you look at it this way, if each functional leader attempts to improve the areas, or to transform the areas without collaboration and without keeping the corporate mandate in sight, then this could do more harm than good. And this could easily get bogged down and pushed back. So the key is for us as procurement function leaders and supply chain leaders to have that alignment and that buy-in from our peers and from senior management. And that all starts with, again, if you go from competency area number 1 to 7, you start with, you know, the corporate strategy, and making sure that our processes are perfectly aligned. And then functional area number 6 would be to sustain the transformation, because a lot of times we make improvements in our functional areas, we make improvements in our supply chain and our organizations, and a lot of times those improvements that don't stick. So we'd be leveraging balanced scorecard and standardized work methods in that endeavor. But to go through the transformation and ensuring that the transformation stick is very, 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 very important. And then competency area number 7 is to have that big picture view of things via a master dashboard. So this is the overall framework that's going to underpin the 4 webinars, and I'm going to go a little more detail into the framework, and again webinars 2, 3, and 4 we're going to go into the micro details. So framework, competency area number 1, we see as outcomes the ability to assist, to improve, or to lead the corporate strategic planning process and to be a part of that. We see that traditionally, in many cases, in many environments where the procurement function, for whatever reason, we in many cases there's like seems as though there's a lack of appreciation, and we don't sit at the strategic table, at the table where the strategic plans are made. And procurement is seen as an afterthought. After they make their plans and they agree on certain strategies, certain strategic moves, and strategic and products, then we are told that, okay, now we need you to, in order to support this, we needed to source X, Y, and Z materials. So we are told after the fact, and we are not part of those processes. But as I mentioned before, there has been in recent times a dramatic shift, a seismic shift in that mindset. Again, where organizations are leveraging their procurement function and the supply chain functions to gain that competitive advantage. So in competency area number 1, we see 1.1, the ability to develop an environmental scan, an external environmental scan. And in many of the webinars, I went into this into detail. An environmental scanning, understanding the business landscape, the landscape in which the organizational landscape that underpins all of those environmental factors, political factors, ecological dimensions, the overall economic picture of things, the technology, if there are any disruptive technologies in our space, and of course we see a tremendous we are on the verge of a tremendous digitization of the procurement and supply chain functions. The industry, to understand the industry dynamics and the competitive forces that bear down on our organizations. So to be able to conduct and understand this environmental situation via in the environmental scanning processes, and to be a part of those processes, it's a great advantage because it gives us better insight on how to design our sourcing strategies and our procurement function strategies. So again, we'll be looking at the outside forces, the external forces that impact our organizations, and then then the organization as a whole, as a team, and again, procurement leaders being a part of that senior level team to develop strategies in response to the environmental factors that bear down on the organization. strategies are formulated, and then from there, the procurement function strategies are aligned and executed to realize the corporate and the procurement function mandates. Of course, developing the SWOT analysis, and that's 1.3. 1.4, very important, very important. The ability to leveraging the ability to lead with credibility. So if we want to transform our environments and our departments, and you want to transform others, we have to be able to transform ourselves and to reflect on those processes. In one of the webinars, if you haven't seen it, you could look at leading the modern procurement function, and leading with credibility was one of the key areas, because at the end of the day, the transformation involves intense collaboration, and the more pristine our credibility is, the easier it will be for us to collaborate with others. The people will be more cooperative. If you lack credibility, then people will have difficulty in realizing effective collaboration, and effective collaboration is a key underpinning and requirement of transformation and transforming the modern procurement function. So we go deep into to those processes, and then from there, to be able to collaborate and leverage a strategic category and commodity team, right? And those processes and the key takeaways that would again underpin the design of the procurement function and the design of the processes that would transform the procurement function. And of course, designing the corporate strategy and conducting annual reviews and those processes. So again, the annual reviews are very important, because the procurement function itself and the supply chain functional leaders should conduct annual reviews, and those should be done in alignment with the corporate annual review. So, and the idea is to look for gaps in performance, and to come up with the necessary tactics to close those gaps, and also to the successes, to understand the underpinnings of those successes, and how they could be duplicated and replicated year after year. So this is competency area number 1. And again, in the next webinar, we're going to go into detail and look at some of the tools that would help you in these competency areas. So competency area number 2, the ability to assist, improve, or lead product strategy planning processes. Again, very important. If we're in manufacturing environments, for procurement, to have a very good understanding of the product strategies and the product requirements. It would put the procurement and supply chain functional leaders in a very advantageous situation. And so this is going to entail understanding our internal customer requirements. Again, if you look at in reference to the SCOR model, where you have plan, okay, it's made up of plan, source, make, deliver, and then reverse, return logistics, and then the enabling functions. So so we see that in terms of the procurement function and supply chain function, relative to the SCOR model, would be source, right? That's the procurement function. And then we have, after source, then we have the manufacturing or the make processes, and then you have the logistics or delivery processes. So if we look as procurement professionals, we treat those other processes as internal customers, and understanding and strive to understand their requirements and capture the most critical requirements, the most critical requirements, and we prioritize them, and we have the mindset where we're going to deliver on those requirements internally, and we collaborate via the, as we mentioned before, the category and the commodity teams. This would put us at a tremendous advantage. And then, of course, understanding the external customer requirements, understanding the service requirements and the product requirements, and understanding the most critical of those requirements. Again, it would put the procurement function at a tremendous advantage if we're able to sit at those meetings and to add value and to have critical input in those processes where those requirements are understood, those requirements are prioritized, those requirements are operationalized, and those requirements, the customer requirements, internal and external, are a critical part of our how we design our procurement function strategy. So the whole idea is that if we design our procurement function strategies to execute on the internal customer requirements, with the understanding that we are here, we exist to meet the external customer requirements. So all processes and all functional areas should converge on the external customer requirements, because that's why we're here. So the better we are at aligning our procurement function strategies, our supply chain strategies to meet those external requirements, the better off we would be. So again, having critical input in those processes are very, 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 very important. To understand the new product development processes and to be involved and engaged early and continuously in those processes are also advantageous to us. And this is a key underpinning of the transformation of the modern procurement function. Traditionally, you have the sales, the marketing, the finance folks, the research and development folks, and engineering. They would sit and they'll come up and they design their products, and then procurement is thought of after the fact. Okay, now we have designed XYZ. Now we need you to ensure a steady supply of these raw materials. So we have thought of, and we are involved later on in the process. So the whole idea, if you rewind where we started off, being part of the designing the corporate strategy up front. So this is what you call the upfront processes, and then designing procurement function strategy that's underpinned by meeting customer requirements and then being involved in those processes continuously. It will put us at an advantage where we'd have the critical insight, and we could offer critical inputs relative to so many parameters of our sourcing, especially in terms of availability of raw materials. Certain raw materials may come from certain parts of the world that may have a volatile situation, and we would have an intimate knowledge of what's happening relative to those raw materials. So to be involved late in the processes with certain, especially after certain commitments are made to customers without our consultation. This happens a lot. It happens a lot in the procurement world. Then it puts us in a very, very sticky situation and a disadvantageous situation. To 2.3, to be able to leverage what we call quality function deployment. And this is a tool which we're going to go into in detail in the next webinar, where we would look at the key components that and the parameters that go into the product design. And it also involves, in the quality function, deployment methodology, QFD. It also involves benchmarking the best-in-class products and where a particular organization wants to be relative to those requirements. Then 2.4, to leverage and to design a product innovation charter. And 2.5, to leverage value and value engineering and understanding value in the eyes of the customers and all the parameters of value. And 2.6, to design a product portfolio management matrix. And if we look at this as in terms of product strategy, new product strategy, new product development strategy, and we look at it in context of the overall context, to the top left of the screen, we see the corporate strategy and some of the processes that we spoke about earlier, the SWOT analysis, the environmental scan, then the new development processes, then we see the PICs, or the product innovation charters, and the new product development strategies, and on platforms and strategies, and then the processes. This is based on a stage gate process. You see stage 1 to stage 5, where stage 5 it's the commercialization or the launch, and then stage 1 is identifying opportunities. So in many cases, in terms of stages, the procurement function, we traditionally maybe stage 2 or stage 3 we involved, right? And we need to be involved in stage 1, and the best way to ensure that is to be part of the big picture here. Competency area number 3, the ability to design the procurement function strategy to realize the corporate strategy. 3.1, to collaborate to realize internal customer requirements, collaboration to realize external customer requirements. So you're talking about heavy collaboration now. 3.3, to analyze points of friction where internal requirements and internal customer requirements or departmental functional area requirements, where they clash with customer requirements, but we have to serve our customer. Where the customer requirements, there's a degree of pressures that it places on the internal processes, and we have no choice other than to deliver on the customer requirements. So to understand points of friction, very important. And we see 3.6, to design a total cost to serve, which would include cost reduction opportunities and processes of how we support operations, our risk mitigation and innovation strategies. Competency area number 4 would be to actually leverage the SCOR model, and we would look at the SCOR processes and understand how to leverage them. That's the plan, source, make, deliver, and the reverse or the return logistics processes, and the enabling processes, including technology. 4.2, we'll go into leveraging the supply chain prioritization matrix, and 4.3, to capture the metrics, and down to 4.6, how to interpret that data. And here's an overview of the SCOR model. And I urge you all to do some research. To the left of the screen, we see sourcing processes relative to the different types of, depending on our strategy, whether it's we source the stock, or we make to order, or we engineer to order, depending on what strategy we're using. And to the right of the screen, we see all of the entire model and how they relate, the plan processes, the make processes, the deliver processes, return and enabling functions, and the whole interaction between suppliers and customers. So this level of understanding, and this is a key underpinning in terms of again, transformation and understanding how the procurement and the strategic sourcing functions, how they relate and how they affect the other functional areas. Competency area number 5, you're going to the ability to transform the procurement function. Again, we're going to look at leveraging Hoshin planning, process improvement methodologies such as Lean, Kaizen, which leverages the Plan, Do, Check, Act methodology, and the Lean Six Sigma methodology that's underpinned by define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So again, this is at the heart of transforming the procurement function and those processes. We would leverage systems thinking and change management, because we speak about transformation, then we're speaking about change and the effective processes to manage change, and building a vision around change, and understanding that organizations are made up of systems, and it starts with, if we want to change something, we as procurement function leaders must have a vision for that change. And we will look at the critical levers to realize systemic change, which are a shared and articulated vision with the right people, the right people who possess the right degree of skills to execute the current functions, and to execute the functions as they pertain to change and transformation in the new way. And another critical part or dimension of change would be the processes and the metrics, the performance performance measurement systems that we have, and degrees of accountability, rewards, and recognition. So those are like what they call 6 cogs, or 6 critical areas of change and transformation. What you call system leverage points. That if we manipulate those 6 dimensions, we could realize and impact change in our environments. And we would look at Hoshin planning or policy deployment as they relate to the drivers and controls of change. We would look at lean methods that are common in supply chain, value stream mapping, understanding how value moves across our organization, and how workflows are executed, and how they impact the entire organization and our supply chain mechanisms. So far we've seen that transformation of the procurement function and transformation of any supply chain, there's a lot involved in this process. Then area number 6, to be able to sustain, as we mentioned before, to sustain the procurement function transformation, we would leverage the balanced scorecard. It requires in this dimension to look at the organization in a very holistic manner. We would look, many organizations focus on financial parameters, and change means changing the financial parameters. And they do so without looking at other critical dimensions in our organizations. So the balanced scorecard methodology would involve looking at our financial metrics. It would involve looking at our customer experience metrics. Again, it goes back to what we mentioned before about understanding our customer requirements and aligning our procurement function strategies, our procurement function tactics, and our procurement function operations to realize those requirements. So again, financial requirements, the financial focus, the customer experience focus, which again is underpinned by customer requirements. The better we meet their requirements, the better we are as procurement function leaders in terms of understanding those requirements, the better we would be at positioning and sourcing the mission critical inputs to realize our corporate mandates. And so the balanced scorecard, again, the financial focus, the customer experience focus, the process and quality focus, and of course the employee focus. So 4 critical areas in the balanced scorecard. And the idea is to extrapolate the metrics and the key performance indicators and to look for cause and effect relationships and to manage and to execute our corporate and our functional area mandates. This transformation also requires the ability to leverage standard work and to leverage institutionalized best practices, and to conduct training needs assessments in our functional areas. Next Level Purchasing Association has what they call the PASS program, where if you're a functional area, if you're a functional leader and you're looking to improve the capability, the savings and the sourcing capability of your procurement staff, you could take an assessment that we have and to determine areas where your staff members, where they're strong, and to determine areas where there's opportunities to improve. So again, as I mentioned before, in terms of transformation, the 6 critical dimensions of transformation would be having a articulated and shared vision. To develop that articulated and shared vision for the procurement function itself, right? And then to have determine all of the activities, to design and build those activities in to realize that procurement function vision. You as a leader, where do you see your procurement function in 3 to 5 years, right? And of course, that vision has to be aligned to the corporate mandate and the corporate vision and mission. So, so the transformation is that articulated vision from us as leaders, shared with the right people. So we have to determine, and we have to, if you're going to transform our function, we have to understand, do we have the right people to help us realize that transformation? Do we have the right people on board? Right? And then if we have the right people on board, do they have the right skill sets? So we have the right people, the right attitude, they align, and we have to understand what are the characteristics of what we call the right people. They should be aligned with the procurement function vision. They should be aligned with the corporate mandate. There should be people who have the ability and the propensity to collaborate, to be very team focused, to be dedicated employees. But those people also need to have the right knowledge and skills and abilities, right? So then again, the PASS program is a critical component of that. So we would need to definitely do a needs assessment, a training needs assessment, if we want to really realize true transformation in our procurement function. And then 6.4 would be response and countermeasures management. So what we mean by this is that in order to sustain the gains from transformation, we have to have response and countermeasure plans in place, because things are not always going to be, if we do make breakthroughs and we do realize degrees of transformation, it doesn't mean that it would stick. We see many times we improve on things, as I mentioned before, things fall apart. So we have to have plans to address any slippage or any backslide from the transformation that we have realized, or the degrees of transformation that we have realized. We have to have the response plans, which would dictate what a slippage or backslide means, and who is responsible and when they're responsible to respond, and how they would address those nonconformities. So again, it is very important that we have mechanisms in place to make the changes stick and to make the transformation stick, else it'll all fall apart. And then lastly, competency area number 7 is for us as procurement and supply chain professionals to understand the big picture, right? That big picture, and how to understand the organizational picture relative to our supply chain and our procurement functions, and to be able to assess this via master dashboards, and to be able to conduct reviews of how things went for a certain period, be it a quarterly period, a yearly period, to have that big picture view. And of course, we have to have the ability to present our findings at this level. So I know that we have mentioned a lot, and there's a lot to cover in these 4 webinars or so. But again, here's what I call the 7 competency areas for transforming the procurement function. So there's a lot to cover, and to be able to have that big picture, and to present our findings to a senior level team, that's also very, very important. So that is the webinar for today. And again, today was the overview. The next webinar, I should be covering competency areas in 1 and 2 in detail. If I have time to get into competency area number 3, we would do so. So we see this as competency area number 1. There are quite a few things there. There's seven areas, sub-competencies. And competency area number 2, there are 6 areas that we would cover. And these are all the competency areas that is what it takes to transform to world-class procurement. I'm going to leave the floor open for any questions that you all may have. I see. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes, I see some people have asked the questions about the PDF. Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think the next set of webinars will be, again, we'll be going into a lot of detail. We'll be looking at the tools and the toolkits to actually realize this stuff. Today was an overview, and I didn't want to um, to start off going into detail because I figured we may have it's easy to lose sight as to the big picture. So I just wanted to introduce you all to the big picture, and I think the big picture itself is a lot to digest. But we are going to be going into a lot of detail. This is why I decided to do this in 4 parts. All right. But yes, you all could get the the slides. Thomas, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and I hope this webinar and the overview that you had today was very helpful. And as we go through this exercise and we go through this 4 webinar journey, we would see that I mean, why are we here, right? To support operations, to manage spend, and to mitigate risk, right? You know, the threefold procurement mandate. But in terms of cost reduction, once we go through all these slides, you would see that there's so many opportunities to reduce costs, especially if the front-end processes we are aligned with them and they support us and they don't work against us and we don't work against them. You know, the earlier, and when I mean the front-end processes, I'm talking about the corporate, the strategic processes, the strategic direction, and picture people setting a strategic direction without consulting the supply chain leaders and the procurement leaders, because at the end of the day, without the supply chain, that strategic direction is null and void. So for us to be able to understand and sit at those meetings and to add the input is critical to us. We have to be able to be masters and experts at the transactional processes. No, that is the old way. The modern way is to be part of the upfront processes, especially as we see digitization, the Internet of Things. It's going to create a tremendous disruption in the supply chain. You know, we definitely have to be up front and center at the most senior levels, helping and designing and having input in design and crafting a corporate level policy. So this way we would have once we understand those and we were part of that, then we could negotiate our situation and our interests, and we bring those to the table, because all of the other departments traditionally have done that. So any other questions? I see Horst, you have a question. You're very much welcome, Orlando. I'm happy you all enjoyed it. The recording for the webinar, I believe you should get an email, a follow-up email asking if you want the recording, and then there's a link that you'll be able to click on and get the recording. I believe that's how it works. I see Thomas. I need the overview, high-level information right now. Details will come as I study my circumstances. Oh yeah. With right from the bat, you're going to go into I believe section 1 is environmental scanning. You know how to do those processes and the tools. We're going to be able to cover all of that stuff So it's going to be fun. So we may even have to do this in maybe in 6 webinars, maybe, because I don't want to rush through this and then you all don't get the true essence of it. But again, it's a lot involved in transformation. We're talking about transformation. I mean, at the end of the day, who are we to transform? It has to be done in a collaborative effort with buy-in, and there's so many dynamics of getting people to buy in and to manage change and personalities and the internal politics and how to manage those. So we're going to go into all of those dynamics, definitely. Yeah, I'm going to go into tremendous depth, Thomas. That's why I'm thinking that he said 4 webinars, but maybe up to 6, right? I mean, you all will give me the feedback. You all are my customers, and I really, again, at NLPA, we're very passionate about seeing you all succeed, and I'm very passionate about that. So if it's going to be 6 webinars, and so be it. That's what we have to do. But you all let me know. Each webinar, give me the feedback. Give me the good feedback, give me the ugly feedback, give me the bad feedback. Just give it to me as it is, and I'll do my best to improve and to make sure that you all are happy. Okay, but again, thank you. I'm not seeing too many questions. I'm seeing a lot of feedback, and I appreciate that a lot. How about services, procurement, some differences? Yes, so that is Orlando. So Orlando, as we go into detail, I'm going to be covering, and I'll be sensitive to all of the different, what you call it, industries. All right, so I'm going to be very sensitive and cater to all the industries: manufacturing, service, and these processes, by the way, this framework is for all of the industries: healthcare, service, aerospace, manufacturing, you name it, telecommunications, you name it. These methodologies could be applied in all of these situations. In some cases, we would have to make some minor modifications, but definitely this could be applied, these methodologies and these systems could be applied across the board. Okay, and again, if you all have any questions in particular, you need any type of advice or anything like that, just shoot me an email. I mean, we're here for you. Shoot me an email and I'll do my best to answer your questions or your concerns. But definitely service would be covered. So we'll be looking at some examples of organizations that have both the manufacturing and the service component, if that answers your question. So that's the level of detail. We'll be looking at situations where they're the manufacturing and the service components. Okay, Joyce, the lecture schedule. In 2 weeks, I have a different webinar, but what you all could do for me to help me out, right, is to shoot an email to NLPA and let them know that you all want part 2 of this ASAP, as soon as possible. This way we could prioritize it. If this is what you all want, this is what I'm going to do. So if you all want, again, webinar number 2 of this series as a priority, you all want that prioritized, just let us know, shoot us an email, let us know, and I'll talk to my folks and let them know that, hey, we got to prioritize this, but this is what you all want. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Joyce. Okay, so thank you all for attending today. It was an honor and a pleasure to serve you and to be here for you and to collaborate with you all. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day. I hope I have answered all of your questions. I'm going to stay on for a couple more minutes. If anybody wants to talk, I'll put the mic on. Just shoot me a question, and we could have a conversation. I'll stay on for a few minutes. But again, Orlando, I'm going to make sure I touch on your on the service sector. You're welcome. You're welcome, Kawasu. You're welcome. Where you viewing from, Kawasu? Thanks for attending. Oh wow! Oh, Nigeria! Oh, amazing! Thank you and welcome. Make sure you come to our other webinars. And again, if you all want webinar number 2 done as soon as possible, let us know, because we have other webinars in the pipeline. But if you all want this one as a priority, and I think it should be a priority, right? Because transformation it's needed right now. We have to be able to be ready for transformation. Just let me know. Let us know. Okay, again, thank you all for attending today's webinar. Have a great rest of the day.